Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, and our own notes and really boil them down for you. We try to get to the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight.
Yeah, give you that shortcut to being well-informed.
Exactly. With hopefully some surprising facts and maybe just enough humor to keep you hooked along the way. Today, we're plunging into a topic that honestly feels increasingly relevant. It's this enduring fascination with prophecy, with ancient mysteries, and just the sheer, breathtaking speed of technological change we're seeing.
It's everywhere.
It really is. And the big question we're exploring is, what if these things, these seemingly separate threads, aren't just connected? What if they're actually, converging right now in our generation,
Well,
shaping a destiny we might not fully get?
it's a really compelling question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it definitely challenges how we usually think about history and progress.
for sure.
Our main source material for this deep dive, it's a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And it doesn't just ask these questions. It lays out a very specific, pretty provocative argument.
Provocative is a good word for it.
Yeah. The author tries to decode historical turning points, these big, sort of arcane macro events, but through the lens of end-time prophecy. It proposes this hidden narrative behind, well, a lot of human history.
So our mission today is to explore its claims, some of which are pretty audacious. Claims about humanity's nature basically not changing, about hidden forces manipulating history.
And these really shocking parallels it draws between ancient times and what it calls our present terminal generation.
Right. It's a look at how these ancient stories are argued to shed light on our modern world, maybe giving insights that make you question, well, everything you thought you knew about where we've come from and where we might be headed.
It's definitely designed to make you think.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because the core idea of this source, it's pretty challenging right from the get-go. It really questions our modern ideas about progress, about evolution.
It does. It anchors itself in this cyclical view of history, pulling directly from Ecclesiastes 1.9 to Kine. You know the one.
What has been will be again.
What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And it goes on, is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new. It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time.
And for the author, this isn't just some philosophical musing.
No, not at all. It's like a foundational principle. It runs through every argument in the text.
And this whole deep dive, really, it's designed to give you, our listener, a way into these ideas, which can be dense, often complex, without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Exactly. And the source takes that scripture, nothing new under the sun, to mean that human nature itself, fundamentally, hasn't changed in maybe 6,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So we might have invented the internet, gone to the moon, mapped the human genome, all that stuff. But our core behaviors, our capacity for good and evil, our drive for power, how easily we can be deceived, our desire for quick fixes, our greed.
You're saying the source claims those things are constant.
Stubbornly consistent is how I'd put the author's view.
Yeah.
And any belief that we've somehow, elevated ourselves, become inherently smarter or more civilized or wiser than people thousands of years ago, the source just calls that ignorance and arrogance.
That's a direct hit against a lot of modern thinking, isn't it? Like the whole idea of constant progress, whether it's New Age stuff or certain religions, or even just the secular belief in endless scientific advancement.
Absolutely. It challenges all of that.
So that's a powerful point then. If human nature is constant, according to the source, what does it say blinds us? Why do we keep making the same mistakes? Because, normally we study history to learn from it, avoid repeating the past.
Right.
But this source seems to flip that idea.
It absolutely does. And what's fascinating is how it critiques why we study history. Academia tells us, learn from the past, don't repeat it. Simple.
Yeah.
But the source argues that it's our very hubris propelled by advances in knowledge and technology that blinds us. It makes us repeat the mistakes.
So our progress actually makes us more likely to repeat mistakes.
That's the argument. It suggests we're almost skillfully preconditioned to repeat them, precisely because we think we're too advanced, too smart to fall into the same old traps. We get blind to the danger, kind of deluded by our own success, just like people before us. It implies our tech leaps actually make us more vulnerable in some ways, not less, to these repeating patterns.
You might think, looking at our world today, instant global communication, AI, constant scientific breakthroughs, we seem so advanced. But the source is asking, are we really that different deep down? from our ancestors, in our core behaviors, our weaknesses.
It argues that ancient people strongly believed the future was always a replay of the past, just like an earthly reflection of bigger cosmic dramas.
A cyclical view.
Exactly, and the source claims this cyclical view is the only way humankind could be judged fairly across generations. The same basic plots, just replay with different actors, different places, different times.
And for this generation, which the source specifically calls the terminal generation, following writers like Hal Lindsey.
Right. It urges even more diligence in seeking wisdom, because it believes our generation will be tested like no other, facing these echoes from the very deep past.
Okay, so this profound sense of history repeating that connects directly to the source's idea of Nephilim residue, right? And these hidden Nephilim bloodlines.
It does, and this is where it gets, well, pretty shocking for many. The source asserts these aren't just old myths.
Not just stories.
No. It argues they are actual, persistent forces that have secretly manipulated history with diabolical intentions, is the phrase used, to divert human destiny from where it was supposed to go.
Like a hidden hand guiding things.
Kind of like a genetic or spiritual influence working behind the scenes, subtly steering humanity. And it argues that the elemental importance of the historic record only really makes sense when it's decoded, when it's understood free from revisionist rewrites and interpretive corruptions by collaborating polytheist moles and secular elitists.
Wow. So the history we learn might be deliberately obscured.
That's the claim, altered by those working for these hidden ancient bloodlines, causing these waves of misunderstanding about our own human journey.
And this is where it gets really impactful for us right now. The source claims that shocking and terrifying repercussions from these hidden bloodlines are going to crest with catastrophic consequences in our generation.
Yes, explicitly labeling it the terminal generation. It posits that this ancient pattern of rebellion against, well, divine order, is echoing loudly again, just like it supposedly did before the flood at the Tower of Babel during the conquest of the Covenant land.
So it's a dire warning wrapped in this historical interpretation, suggesting these ancient forces are peaking now with real-world effects.
And this is where the source connects these ancient narratives directly to apocalyptic prophecies. It urges us, the listener, you, to be really aware, really alert to these times.
It cites scripture here, right?
It does. Passages like Matthew 24.3, Mark 13.3, where Jesus talks about the signs of the end of the age and the need to be on guard, be alert.
Okay.
The source believes all apocalyptic prophecy should be applied specifically to this current generation. We have to learn the lessons, the parallels from antiquity, not just as history buffs, but as vital guidance to, quote, cope with the hell that is surely coming.
That's intense.
It is, but it's presented not as sacrilege or being naive, but as following a kind of scriptural instruction, a blueprint for understanding what's happening.
Okay, so if history echoes and these hidden forces are potentially at play, let's shift from that cyclical view to a specific kind of echo the source talks about.
Right.
The danger of knowledge, unchecked knowledge.
Right.
The source sees a disturbing prophetic connection between our modern explosion of knowledge and technology and what it calls antediluvian knowledge and technology.
And it makes a really stark claim. Corruption of knowledge doomed the ancient world to destruction.
That's a fundamental challenge to how we usually see things. We tend to think progress, scientific advancement, that's inherently good.
Exactly. But this source suggests knowledge itself can be destructive if it's misused or if it's not anchored in some kind of moral framework.
So how does that work? How was knowledge corrupted back then, according to the source?
Well, it introduces this concept of the 7 spurious sciences.
The serious sciences.
Yeah. According to the author, these were specific types of forbidden knowledge, or maybe early forms of tech, that were used by the descendants of Cain. The crucial point is they were void of any moral governances or acknowledgement of the true God.
Okay, so knowledge without ethics.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And instead of being used for good, their unrestrained use led directly to disaster and apocalypse back then. The implication is clear. Knowledge, detached from a higher moral or spiritual authority, inevitably becomes destructive.
And this is where it gets really unsettling, because the source basically turns to us and asks, does this ring familiar?
Right.
We live in this age of just unprecedented advancements. AI, genetic engineering, the internet pumping out unfiltered information 24/7.
And the source describes us as being intoxicated with technology, often blind to the dangers inside our own creations, seeing these paradoxical opportunities of false hope, where the source argues there's really just peril.
It suggests our whole civilization is like standing at the precipice of unknown disaster, teetering at the hands of our own intelligence, but we do not perceive the danger. And the author argues our generation has basically surrendered its authority to decide which technologies should be advanced. We're letting the pursuit of knowledge itself dictate our future instead of us guiding it ethically.
Which raises a critical question. If our tech boom isn't inherently good, what is its true nature, according to this source?
Yeah, what's the claim?
It claims modern science is fundamentally rooted in and nourished by the originating 7 spurious sciences. It views science itself as, quote, merely another religious variety steeped in evolutionary mysticism, teaching this idea of continuous, unending evolution towards godhood.
So, science as a religion.
In a way, yeah. Paralleling that ancient pride, that hubris where humanity tried to become divine through its own efforts, setting the stage, the source argues, for a repeat of those antediluvian mistakes, where unchecked knowledge led to ruin. Our whole modern idea of linear progress gets framed as a dangerous delusion.
And it connects this ancient pride directly to what it calls the great antediluvian sin, which was
the sexual union between humans and the angelic realm, and also Cain's descendants living in defiance of divine laws.
Okay. And then the source makes a huge leap from that ancient transgression to something very modern.
The alien phenomena.
Right. It argues this whole UFO alien thing is yet another diabolical deception and violation of the laws of creation. And it's specifically targeted at us, at our easily deluded but technologically advanced terminal generation.
It's not just about lights in the sky. It's framed as part of a much bigger, much older plan.
And didn't the source mention something surprising about the Vatican here?
It did. It includes this detail about Monsignor Corrado Balducci, who is a high-ranking Catholic theologian. Apparently, he publicly acknowledged alien encounters, the possibility of alien life, and even suggested they might be part of God's creation.
Wow. Okay, that adds a layer, doesn't it? It makes the source's later claims about alien deception feel, well, maybe less easy to just dismiss out of hand.
It lends it a certain weight, for sure, even if it was cautious acknowledgement.
So these alien encounters, according to the source, they aren't just friendly visits.
No. The author dives into the common themes in abduction stories. The probing, the DNA samples being taken, implantation, this detailed exploration of biological compatibility.
With a specific goal.
Yes. The stated goal, according to these accounts and the source's interpretation, is creating hybrid beings, half human and half alien.
Hybrids.
And the source explicitly links this to what was done in antediluvian times with Emma Kaseth.
Emma Kaseth. Can you clarify that?
Right. The source presents Emma Kaseth as, well, it's a bit unclear if it's a specific ancient entity, a group, or maybe a category of beings. But the point is, the author connects this name to those very early attempts at creating hybrids between the angelic realm and humans.
So it's like a modern replay of an ancient taboo. A violation of creation's laws aimed at fundamentally changing humanity.
That's exactly how it's presented, a profound violation.
But why is crossbreeding or altering species seen as so sinful here? What's the reasoning?
The source puts it down to delusional pride. It argues that altering God's creation, and it points to Leviticus 19.19, do not make different kinds of animals, has unknown, dangerous, potentially catastrophic consequences.
Like playing God.
Exactly. It's seen as trying to improve upon what God has already created, a direct grab for divine authority. And the source foresees humankind creating contemporary Nephilim on our own through gene editing, DNA manipulation, or doing it in partnership with these angelically sponsored aliens.
The ultimate new man project.
Right. And it even suggests that mythological creatures we usually dismiss, like centaurs, half human, half horse, might have actually been real, born from these ancient violations. The source wonders if that law in Leviticus was a direct response to stop things like that from happening again. It's not just about mixing breeds within a species, but crossing fundamental kinds of beings, blurring the lines of creation itself.
Okay, and the source then predicts a chilling future tied to this hybrid idea.
It does. It describes a future coming-out celebration for these so-called aliens. And at this event, they'll present these superhuman crossbreeds as a kind of cosmic gift to humanity.
A gift.
Supposedly. These beings are predicted to be larger, stronger, and smarter, and will live longer, offering a path to human improvement.
But there's a catch.
A huge one. This, the source claims, will effectively downgrade the average human, making him or her obsolete. leading to potential extinction or slavery for anyone resisting this new utopia.
So a new caste system based on genetics.
That's the picture it paints. Average humans become uncomplimentary reminders of an inferior past, only good for toil, servitude, or extermination. It even compares it to the ancient blackheads in Sumerian lore, a group supposedly subjugated by others. A future based on genetic purity and enhancement. It's pretty bleak.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but still connected. From this corruption of knowledge and the hybrid threat, the source suggests there's a unifying force emerging, a kind of global mystery religion.
Yes, it contends that science itself, as we practice it, is actually merely another religious variety steeped in evolutionary mysticism, teaching this constant evolution towards godhood.
That's a radical way to look at science. Not objective truth-seeking, but a spiritual path.
With its own dogmas and ultimate goals, yes, that's the source's perspective.
And this idea of humanity evolving to godhood. The source says it's shared by other belief systems, too.
Right, it connected to the New Age movement, various forms of Gnosticism, mystical Eastern religions. And what's really intriguing is the claim that seemingly innocuous symbolism permeates highly educated fraternities of engineers, scientists, and medical practitioners.
Symbolism linking back to.
Linking back to the 7 mystical sciences of Enoch.
Okay, what are those again?
The source presents them as this ancient body of secret, esoteric knowledge, maybe tied to the biblical Enoch, which it argues got perverted and used by fallen angels and their hybrid offspring way back.
So the idea is this hidden, corrupted knowledge is subtly woven into modern institutions, even science and medicine, like a hidden spiritual agenda.
That's the implication. An agenda within fields we usually see as totally secular and objective.
Building on that, the source introduces this concept of the coming Babylon, but it's not the ancient city coming back to life, right?
No, it's interpreted as a future great harlot religion, a massive amalgamation, mixing all existing religions, bits of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, with pantheistic ones, creating one universal spiritual system.
A one-world religion.
Essentially. And this new mysticism will have a new scientific slant, mixed with ideas about aliens, a universe full of godlike beings, merging spirituality, science, and ETs into one probably very seductive package.
And how does it justify this blending of religion and, like, ancient astronaut theories?
Well, it uses ancient texts like Ezekiel and Revelation, but also leans heavily on the theories of Zecharia Sitchin.
Sitchin, the Anunnaki guy.
That's the one. Proposed that ancient Sumerian texts describe aliens, the Anunnaki, creating humanity. The source uses these ideas liberally to claim things like God's throne was actually a spaceship, and ancient gods or angels were really extraterrestrials.
That's a radical reinterpretation. It completely shifts the narrative about who our ancestors and gods were, creates this powerful alternative story that supports the idea of a coming unified religion.
Exactly. It lays the groundwork.
And who leads this new age, according to the source?
It predicts these genetically created super beings. The modern Nephilim or Gibborim will spearhead it. They become the hidden leaders of religious activities and government.
So the hybrids are in charge.
In this scenario, yes. This new age, which the source calls the Age of Aquarius, gets marketed as this amazing time of boundaryless peace and cooperation, enlightenment, global harmony.
Sounds good.
But the source warns these leaders, these potentates, will actually use it to cement a new world order based on deception.
Yeah.
It's an illusion of utopia, a trap.
So what about the nature of this enlightenment itself? The Age of Aquarius sounds positive, usually.
Not according to the source. It argues that astrologically, Aquarius is actually a time of harsh judgment reigned over by Saturn.
Saturn, okay.
It interprets this as a period of intense tribulation. Humankind forced to choose between Satan's deceptions, which look reasonable, logical, offering false freedom and faith in the true God. So enlightenment here isn't progress. It's a spiritual battlefield.
And this whole elaborate setup, the source says it's part of Satan's grand plan.
His revenge plot is how the source puts it, to deceive humanity. The ultimate goal is to present himself as the true liberator, offering knowledge, free choice, while slandering the Christian God as, oppressive, enslaving.
Twisting the Garden of Eden story.
Exactly. Turning the pursuit of knowledge into this powerful, seductive lie for the end times.
Okay, so where is the physical center of all this? Does the source pinpoint a location for this Babylon?
It uses a kind of triple allegory. First, Babylon is like Tyre, representing huge commerce, global free trade, wealth that makes modern cities look small.
Okay, money and trade.
Second, It's like Nineveh, characterized by extreme violence, torture, genocide. It's called the City of Blood.
Violence and oppression.
And third, it embodies ancient Babylon itself, the essence of evil, pride, luxury, idolatry, rebellion. This future city will be incredibly wealthy, ruthlessly powerful, and its ultimate goal, the source claims, is the genocide of the saints.
The genocide of the saints. And does it name a specific city today?
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source definitively identifies Rome as the future Babylon city.
Rome. Why Rome?
Based on Revelation 17.9, which mentions a city on 7 hills. The source argues Rome is the only city fitting that specific prophecy. It suggests a diabolical takeover from within Catholicism will lead to this true, inclusive, universal church centered there, implying a dark future role for the Vatican.
But it's careful not to indict the current church.
Right. It emphasizes this isn't about Catholicism today, but a prediction that the harlot religion will be spawned secretly within through an evil usurping of his power from within, and internal corruption seizing control.
Wow. Okay. And to back up this idea of a future global Holocaust, the source looks at historical examples.
Chillingly detailed examples, particularly Nazi Germany.
Right.
It argues Nazism is a terrible testimonial of the woe that is to come, highlighting its deep roots in mysticism and occultism, even though it had a public Christian cloak. This isn't just a quick comparison. It's a deep dive into how occult beliefs fueled a genocidal regime as a warning for the future.
So what were those occult roots specifically?
Well, it details the huge influence of Helena Blavatsky's theosophy. It spread fast in Germany from the 1880s, leading to various pan-Aryan anti-Semitic groups.
And the swastika.
The source points out the Nazis adopted the swastika, which was Blavatsky's personal emblem, as direct evidence of the link. This then fed into Ariosophy, a mix of Germanic racist ideas, occultism, and theosophy.
Ariosophy.
Yeah, it promoted this folk soul or Volkish ideology, deeply nationalistic, racial mysticism, openly hostile to traditional Christianity. It basically turned Jesus into just a mortal teacher and talked about a heroic collective entity divinely ordained to manifest power, a kind of mystical destiny for the Aryan race.
And this connects to the Nazi Newman project we talked about earlier, the hybrid idea.
Explicitly. The source links Nazi eugenics trying to improve the human race through selective breeding to creating modern Nephilim, a super-Aryan white race, through genetic manipulation.
It connects it to Nietzsche, too.
Yeah, Nietzsche's Superman idea, mixed with esoteric Rosicrucian doctrine. This doctrine, the source claims, actually demanded the creation of super beings, a new master race of supermen, created through something special in the blood, some kind of spiritual or genetic essence. It echoes that Rosicrucian Vril idea of awakening dormant superhuman potentials, a terrifying historical precedent.
And this wasn't just some fringe belief within the Nazis.
No, the source argues it was central to the leadership. It talks about Hitler's occult mentors like Dietrich Eckart, who apparently initiated Hitler into the secret doctrine, much of it from theosophy. Hitler himself was a longtime occult student, a convinced Ariosophist.
He believed in non-human influences.
He believed in non-human visitors, yeah. Called them great masters who secretly guide human evolution, producing divine hybrid beings back in Atlantis, which sounds incredibly similar to the alien hybrid stuff the source discusses earlier, implying these masters were fallen angels.
It's a disturbing parallel.
It even notes Hitler believed Hans Horbiger, who had this cosmology about giants dominating the pre-flood world. Hitler apparently thought Horbiger was one of history's greatest astronomers.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source paints a picture of this complex web of secret societies behind the Nazis.
A really insidious web. It lists groups like Freemasonry, the Illuminati, the German Norden, the Thule Society, the Teutonic Knights, identifying them as entities dedicated to Luciferian principles.
With a specific agenda.
Their ultimate goal, heavily influenced by that Illuminati dogma, the end justifies the means, was to destroy current government and religion and replace them with a Luciferian messiah.
Wow.
The Thule Society, for instance, is described as an Aryan order deep into black magic and Satanism, believing its members were descendants of Atlanteans and their enemies were the pure seed of Adam, the Israelites. It's this chilling vision of a long-running, interconnected conspiracy aiming for a total global shift, echoing that ancient Nephilim conflict.
All right, continuing this deep dive, the narrative moves on to a key figure in this end times picture, the false prophet.
Right. From Revelation 13.
Described as a spurious Christian leader who infiltrates and corrupts mainstream Christianity. He looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon.
Exactly. A deceptive front hiding his real nature. His main job is to lead this future religion of Babylon and introduce its doctrine, which the source calls the doctrine of Babylon, basically that old pantheistic theology from the age of dragons and Nephilim.
And his core objective, what's the main goal?
It's profound, really. To reduce Jesus from being God to being just a mortal prophet and definitely not the Messiah.
Which aligns with?
The source says it aligns with certain Gnostic ideas, Jesus as an enlightened teacher, not divine savior, and also some fascist Islamic doctrines that deny his divinity and crucifixion. This false prophet will be seen as a great prophet, maybe like Moses, playing the role of a false Elijah, paving the way for the real target, the Antichrist.
And he's not just talk, right? The source says he has powers.
Superhuman powers, yeah. To deceive people. He performs great and miraculous signs, even makes fire come down from heaven in full view of men, backed up by masterful manifestations from fallen angels.
Like a magic show on a global scale?
Pretty much. The source calls him a future Hermes, referencing the Greek god of magic, a magus unlike any our generation has witnessed. He supposedly rediscovers and brings back the lost knowledge of Atlantis, Enoch, and Babel. It's a grand spectacle of deception aimed at persuading a biblically ignorant, technologically advanced, and rebellious generation that this is a new, good spiritual era.
You know, you might find this incredible, but the source argues that all those pantheistic religions, the ones seeing divinity everywhere, not in one god, could actually unite pretty easily under one banner.
Why is that?
Because it claims they all share the same original, spurious religion of Cain. This common ancient root of rebellion and self-deification. It even traces big religions like Hinduism and Buddhism back to Babylonian derivatives, suggesting this deep ancient connection between beliefs that look totally different on the surface. Okay, so the pantheistic religions are easy to unify, but what about the monotheistic ones? Judaism, Christianity, Islam.
Right, they pose a different challenge. Even though they share roots in one god, Adonai, as the source calls him, there are these subtle but seemingly infinitely large chasms between them.
But the source thinks they can be unified.
It explicitly claims they could, in truth, be bridged, and indeed unified for all the wrong reasons, should specific deceptions be employed, implying a deliberate, calculated plan to overcome their core differences for the sake of global religious unity.
Okay, so what's the core deception? What's the big lie designed to bridge these faiths and shatter their foundations?
The source predicts an earth-shattering discovery will explode onto the world scene. And this discovery will supposedly reveal Jesus was just a man, not God. That he wasn't really crucified and, crucially, not resurrected.
Wow.
It's designed to rip mainstream Christianity apart, right? Make its central claims obsolete. It devalues Jesus to just a great prophet, but a mortal prophet, and certainly not the Messiah, removing the unique things about Christianity that stop it from just blending into a universal faith.
And the source mentions Gnosticism playing a key role here.
A pivotal role. It says Christian Gnostics claim they are the authentic Christian church. Believing the Bible we have was manipulated by Catholicism Constantine way back when.
Why? What was the motive?
To elevate Jesus to God's status purely for power and control, they claim, while suppressing earlier Gnostic Gospels like texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls Nag Hammadi library, which supposedly showed a different Jesus.
And this Gnostic viewpoint has infiltrated.
This underground, spurious form of Christianity, the source suggests, has infiltrated the mother church, Catholicism, and is poised to put a Gnostic heretic, an anti-pope, at its head, someone who would publicly deny the resurrection.
That wouldn't just be a split, that would be an internal coup, shattering one of the world's biggest religions from the inside.
Exactly, a profound takeover.
And the attack on Christianity starts where, according to the source,
with the renewed persecution of the father of Christianity, Saul of Tarsus, the Apostle Paul.
Why Paul specifically?
Because his teachings, especially his emphasis on Christ's divinity and resurrection, directly state Jesus is God, which Gnostics condemn as heresy.
Okay, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source talks about an ultimate role reversal.
Yeah, where Adonai, the traditional god of the Old Testament, gets slandered, portrayed as an evil, oppressive god who restricts freedom and knowledge.
And Lucifer.
Lucifer gets elevated. He's presented as the god of light and knowledge, the redeemer of humankind, struggling for humanity's liberation against this supposedly oppressive god.
So Lucifer becomes the good guy.
That's the deception. The source claims this is the true knowledge of who their god is, Lucifer, that secret societies like the Freemasons are seeking. It points to figures like Albert Pike, a high-ranking Freemason, and his book, Morals and Dogma. Pike famously called Lucifer the god of light, reinforcing this twisted theology.
The source even makes a strange connection to the Ku Klux Klan.
It does, yeah. Curiously relates the KKK to this wider web of Luciferian secret societies. It points to the KKK's hierarchy being full of dragon, Nephilim, Atlantean, and fairy imagery, linking them to these ancient hidden forces. And its anti-mixed race stance is framed as a modern echo of that old Nephilim agenda against pure human bloodlines.
That definitely broadens the alleged conspiracy into some unsettling areas, suggesting its reach extends into really disparate extremist groups.
It does. And it also brings up influential figures who might push this philosophy, like Aleister Crowley.
The Satanist. He was on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper cover, right?
He was. A 33rd-degree Freemason, notorious Satanist, believed he was the 666 Beast of Revelation, a prophet for a new religion called Thelema. And he famously wrote that the serpent Satan made our race gods through knowing good and evil, equating Satan with life and light.
So providing a philosophical basis for this Lucifer as god of light deception.
Exactly, which the source claims is central to the coming unified religion and the whole plot to debase Jesus.
Okay, as we move toward the climax of this whole narrative, the source says something is holding back the Antichrist.
Yes. It explains that a divine force, the Holy Spirit, is actively preventing the spirit of the Antichrist from grabbing absolute global power before the prophesied time, citing 2 Thessalonians.
There's a specific timing involved, a restraint.
Exactly, a preordained moment. Until then, this powerful unseen force holds back the full manifestation of evil.
And the source looks at historical figures who could have been the Antichrist, but weren't.
Yeah, it reviews several. It considers plausible antichrists, people who embodied the spirit of the figure but were somehow prevented or slain before getting absolute global rule.
Like who?
Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Mussolini, Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, Mao. Figures with that tyrannical ambition for world domination, but their timing or circumstances just weren't right for the full prophetic fulfillment.
And it uses some of these figures to show historical echoes of this Babylonian religion.
It does. Points to Robespierre during the French Revolution with his cult of the supreme being or cult of reason, aggressively anti-Christian, even rededicating Notre Dame to the goddess Isis, presented as a clear historical example of the Babylonian religion setting the stage.
And Alexander the Great, too.
Yeah, highlights his legendary divine lineage. Stories about his mother Olympias sleeping with a serpent called a recurring Nephilim creation theme. In his pilgrimage to the Temple of Amun, where the priests greeted him as welcome from his father, Amun, linking him to Atlantean and Nephilim kingships as the two-horned one, implying a lineage tied to those hidden bloodlines.
Okay, so beyond just a powerful leader, how does Scripture itself define this beast, the Antichrist?
The source points to Psalm 73, characterizing a spiritual beast as having an embittered spirit, being ignorant of God's love, slandering celestial beings, and following the ways of Cain, rebellion, murder. Jude corroborates this, defining beasts as those who slander celestial beings and reject God's authority.
So it's a spiritual state, not just about power.
Exactly. A corrupt internal state that defines the figure.
All right, moving to the global stage then, the source makes a bold claim about world government.
Very bold. It states world government is not a mythical, unattainable goal, but a reality that will be achieved in this generation.
Wow, that's a stark prediction for right now.
It points to prophecies in Daniel and Revelation about a fourth kingdom rising from the ashes of the old Roman Empire, made up of 10 separate kingdoms or trading groups.
And gives examples.
Yeah, it cites things like the EEC, now EU, NAFTA, the Pacific Rim bloc, the former Soviet bloc, as examples of these groups already assembling. And it says Rome isn't just symbolic, it's the literal embryo and epicenter where this new global order will emerge from.
And from these 10 kingdoms,
A stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise, the Antichrist. But he ascends deceitfully, not through obvious conquest, but a relatively peaceful and bloodless coup, using cunning and manipulation.
but he causes devastation.
Astounding devastation, yes. He subdues 3 of the 10 trading blocs the source suggests, probably North American and European democracies, and then redistributes their wealth globally. His rise is marked by shrewdness, calculated moves, not just brute force initially.
And his rise culminates in
Negotiating a worldwide peace treaty, which the source chillingly calls the Covenant of Death.
a covenant of death.
This treaty is meant to confirm that spurious dream of global utopia. and its signing marks the official start of the 7-year tribulation period.
But the peace doesn't last.
Not at all. It's totally deceptive. Exactly 3.5 years into this covenant, the 10 horns representing the kingdoms, or the Antichrist himself, violently turn on Babylon, which is Rome.
Destroy Rome.
With nuclear weapons, according to the source's reading of Revelation 17. Why? Because the new global government gets deliriously jealous of Babylon's wealth and spiritual influence, sees it as a rival.
Okay, so Rome is destroyed. What happens next? This leads to the ultimate rebellion.
Yes. The Antichrist fills the spiritual vacuum left by Rome's destruction. He proclaims himself God in the rebuilt Jerusalem temple, citing 2 Thessalonians 2.4, establishes himself as his own religion, forces everyone to worship his image.
But the source takes it even further, something about galactic government.
It does. Claims this delusionary ideal of being part of a galactic government leads to visible galactic warlike encounters. And during these, heavenly beings loyal to God will be tortured and humiliated in a public spectacle, citing Daniel 8, a grotesque display of power.
Horrifying.
And this whole sequence climaxes with Satan and the fallen angels finally being cast down to earth, Revelation 12, bringing their destructive influence directly onto humanity.
And the Antichrist doesn't just declare himself God, he launches a propaganda campaign.
An unimaginable campaign of negative advertising, slandering God, Jesus, monotheism, painting them as oppressive, outdated, evil forces holding humanity back from its true divine potential.
And then comes the global Holocaust prediction.
Chillingly, yes. It reinterprets Matthew 13, Jesus talking about separating wheat and weeds.
Yeah.
In this twisted New World Order version, the saints, those loyal to God, are labeled evil weeds to be gathered and burned, making the Jewish Holocaust pale by comparison.
And this is justified how?
Justified openly as necessary for humanity's evolution into gods, with fiery furnaces used again for mass extermination. It's a truly terrifying vision.
Okay, this raises a really important point, especially for people familiar with end-time prophecy, the rapture. Specifically, the pre-tribulation rapture idea.
Right, the common belief that Christians get removed from Earth before the 7-year tribulation starts.
What does the source say about that?
It critically examines it and argues it's in grievous and disastrous error.
Error, how so?
It clarifies that the wrath of God, specifically the bowl judgments in Revelation 16, doesn't actually begin until the midpoint of the tribulation. When the Antichrist takes full power, the abomination happens. Not right at the beginning of the 7 years. That timing distinction is crucial.
And this timing mistake, it has severe consequences in this scenario.
Huge consequences for many Christians, the source predicts. Those expecting an early rapture will apparently slander the person who negotiates the covenant of death, the Antichrist, with unrestrained veracity, because they're confident they'll be gone before things get really bad.
They'll speak out boldly.
Exactly. But this public defiance, based on a mistaken timeline, leads to their humiliation and discredit beyond understanding when the rapture doesn't happen when they expected. Their bold words are proven wrong, publicly, painfully, undermining their credibility, causing massive confusion and despair.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture,
this event triggers a massive schism of Christianity, unprecedented in scale. The source claims that seditious and evil church-going liberals and Gnostics will use this moment to openly side with the New World Order. And they'll brand the loyal saints, the ones who were wrong about the timing but right about the Antichrist, as fanatical, ultra-right-wing bigots.
So a profound internal split within Christianity.
Deeper than anything before, the source suggests, making even historical splits like the Protestant Reformation pale by comparison. It becomes this deep ideological battle where the very meaning of truth and faith gets twisted and weaponized for persecution.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear the main theme from the Genesis 6 conspiracy is this profound, intricate deception, a diabolical genius of deception, as the source puts it.
Yeah, it paints a really stark picture. A world intoxicated by socialist, false hopes and utopian expectations, eagerly welcoming a self-declared madman of mayhem who's disguised as a peacemaker, a savior.
A world turned completely inside out, upside down, where truth is trampled and evil pretends to be enlightenment.
And the source really implores us, the listener, you, to heed these warnings, to stay vigilant. In an age where objective truth feels harder and harder to pin down, where information or what claims to be information is just everywhere, discernment is key.
It's more than just knowing facts.
Right. It's about trying to understand the currents underneath, being able to tell a true warning from a very sophisticated delusion.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening right now? If ancient people thought the future was just a replay of the past, and this source argues our generation is uniquely set up for a catastrophic replay of history's darkest moments. How do you tell the difference? How do you discern a true warning from a clever delusion in an age that seems designed to blind us with what it calls enlightenment? Something to think about as you navigate your own world, looking at the information and the narratives all competing for your belief.